For example, we have very limited water sources, as we have established already, but water is one of the causes of conflict in our place. And water is one of the most scarce resources that we have. So once that happens, once there is scarcity, then it puts a lot of pressure and stress on the established mechanisms to resolve conflicts.
Yeah.
And once that is challenged, then you have a very fragile situation where now it can cause conflicts between communities.
Now, when we talk about conflict in Africa, we usually think of politics, borders, and armed groups. But conflict can begin with something much more basic: a river running low, a borehole under pressure, or communities competing for drinking water and pasture. Few places understand that risk better than Mandera. Sitting at the meeting point of Kenya, Ethiopia, Somalia, the county is shaped by trade, pastoralism, insecurity, and climate pressure. At the center of that story is the Daua River, a shared resource with the potential to support water supply, irrigation, energy, livestock, and cross-border commerce. From Cairo to Cape Town, Lagos to Lamu, 54 nations, one continent, countless perspectives. Hi, I'm Waweru Njoroge. Welcome to Panel 54, a global perspective through an African lens. This is the podcast where we unpack power, policy, people, and the paradoxes that define our time. With nuance, with history, and with a deliberate commitment to context. This isn't punditry, it's perspective. It's not a briefing, it's a reframing, and it starts right here. The proposed Daua multipurpose dam could transform Mandera's economy. But because the river crosses borders, it is also a test of diplomacy, public trust, and regional cooperation. Can the Daua move Mandera beyond drought response and emergency relief? And can Kenya, Ethiopia, and Somalia agree on how to share its benefits before water becomes another source of tension in the Horn? Our guest is His Excellency Dr. Ali Maalim Mohamud, Deputy Governor of Mandera County. So, Your Excellency, welcome to Panel 54. Thank you for joining us. Yeah. Dr. Ali, I want to start with your journey. I'm looking at going from Minnesota to Mandera, all right? So your journey runs from healthcare, which started in the United States, and then leadership once you got into Kenya, in one of the most complex counties in Kenya. What prepared you for leadership in Mandera, and what would you call the thing that did not prepare you at all for leadership in Mandera?
Thank you very much, Njoroge. I think that's the correct name.
Waweru, but it's okay.
Waweru. Okay, thank you very much, Waweru. I appreciate the opportunity that you've provided me to actually speak to you and of course, the world on issues related to Mandera. Yes, you could say how I started my journey from Minnesota to Mandera, but I think it's better to frame it from Mandera to Minnesota, then back to Mandera.
Like boomerang, come back.
Yes. So as a young man, I grew up in Mandera when Mandera was far much worse than what we see today, almost close to a small settlement, where I did my formal education, my primary level and secondary. And then I went on to the United States to pursue further education. Mm-hmm. And so there I trained as a pharmacist, and then of course went to Masters in Business Administration and many other certifications in between. Later on, as a student leader, both in my formative levels and at the university, I could naturally discern some of the needs in our backyards, particularly where I came from. And that was enhanced more by my exposure in the United States and in many other countries that I visited, that actually leadership can have an impact. That the reason why the West is the West and the developed world is developed is not just because of an accident. Mm-hmm. It's because of some sort of leadership. And so that is when I had begun thinking about generally at an African level, continental level, at the Kenyan level, and at my hometown level. And so I had started immediately drifting towards getting to know more about leadership, more about transforming societies, engineering things at home, based on the experiences that I was able to accumulate. And so ideally, I came back. I've stayed in the US for about 8-9 years.
Okay.
A significant part of which I was a student. And then when I came back, I started actually joining leadership at various levels within the community, which has transitioned me now to where I am as a political leader in my area, of course, and also for Kenyans.
Okay. And what, in terms of, you've told me what you have in terms of what caused you to want to become that leadership position, but what was it that did not prepare you for? As in the things that caught you off guard, or things that were speed bumps in the way that you were like, okay, fine, this has made me change my thinking in terms of maybe that's not necessarily how leaders portray themselves, or maybe it's an internal shift that allows me then to adapt to situations as opposed to trying to do a blueprint or photocopy of what everybody else has done.
Exactly. And so this whole thing, it's not an mutually exclusive process. When you have that spark to lead, to really guide and see the difference between where you have come from and where you are in terms of development and exposure, then you realize that there's something wrong with our leadership.
Okay.
And so, and the leadership has established culture. So to introduce a new way of thinking, new way of looking at issues, is a very, very difficult thing. So it really requires a very long time, long period to really change the thinking of your community, because the nature and the way in which, for example, and I'm not necessarily saying that I'm doing copy cut paste, but I'm just saying that there are certain important things that we could borrow from countries that have moved forward in terms of political leadership, in terms of economic leadership, social aspects, many things. That does not wash away the fact that we are cultured people as Africans. We are people of religion. We are people of norms.
Yeah.
And those are really important, and it holds our societies together. So there are certain things in terms of leadership and governance that we could borrow from these countries. There are many things that could also borrow from us in terms of culture and society. And so one of my biggest challenges was to really give this leadership thing a different approach, a different thinking, a different way in which our people look. So some of the things were too radical, to the extent that you just have to let them go, but also continue to press on, because a lot of it, people will just see you as somehow crazy.
Yeah.
They're very radical, very surgical, but very impactful. So as you know, especially where my backyard is, where you normally make political entry in order to move upwards, there's a lot of bumps along the way. And a lot of them is religious, a lot of them is cultural, a lot of them is negotiated democracy, where people will, as a clan, just try to divide leadership between themselves.
Yeah.
So they say clan X will take this, clan Y will take, which really is a big problem, because then it is not based on merit. And if it's not based on merit, the chances that you will not pick a very merited leader, somebody who could really not only be useful to that region, but useful to the country, useful to the entire continent and to the world, is left out at that level. And so these are some of the challenges I've had initially. I had a very serious ambition to begin with, not only at that level, but to some upper levels, much national level type of leadership. Because you can't just, like Kenya is just a country, as is Africa is a continent. So you can't decide that you want to change and transform a small section. Well, the rest of the country, for example, requires similar leadership.
Yes. Okay.
But you have to start somewhere. And where you start can have massive challenges, which means, I told you can be left out in the middle, and you will not even have the opportunity to really push on things. But as I continue to push on, now people seem to realize that I am now able to provide a certain alternative to the kind of leadership that we have right now.
Okay, very quickly, because we're talking about from Mandera to Minnesota, back to Mandera. But what is it that the Kenyans get it wrong in terms of what do they misunderstand most about Mandera?
Kenyans, right? Well, Mandera, you see, when you think as a Kenyan, sometimes you cannot detach our national history as a country from the way our people think.
True.
Because this has been molded and manufactured over a long period of time for us to think a certain way as a nation, as a people. And many regions in our country who are generally on the borders are seen as periphery counties. Mandera, for example, is seen as a periphery county, a county that is out there, that is really on the edge of this country. But in reality, what people that's in the context. So your reference point is Nairobi or Central.
Yeah.
What people don't see is that these counties called quote unquote periphery are actually the gateway to our country.
Yeah.
And they are very important economically because, for example, Mandera is located at the tip of northeastern Kenya. And Mandera brings together Ethiopia. It brings Somalia on this side. And what that does is that it is a triangle that actually brings together three countries, which means that, for example, in Ethiopia, the population is 140 million or so. I might not be exactly correct, but they are about. Somalia, similar population, 25 million, 30 million. Now, in terms of economic growth, in terms of business and trade, Kenya is able to tap into this population through Mandera. And unfortunately, because of infrastructural challenges and historical marginalizations, some of these things were happening at a marginal level, but they can be enhanced. And I have always said that the next gateway for Kenya's economic growth is going to be northern Kenya, particularly the county of Mandera.
Okay, I'm going to come to that in terms of exploring that a bit later. What I want to look at right now is the aspect of when water becomes a security issue.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm going to change gears a bit. Now, here's a fact. In February, boreholes supplied 68% of Mandera's water. Yeah. In February, boreholes supplied 68% of Mandera's water, while households traveled an average of 9.4 kilometers to reach a main water source.
Yes.
Right? So 68% from borehole, 9.4 kilometers walking to get a water source. What do those numbers mean in the life of an ordinary family?
So clearly that it shows that there is a lot of hardship, especially for the common households within the county. First of all, you have to understand that Mandera itself is about 26,000 square kilometers. It is, I think, the fourth or the third largest county in this country, following Turkana, Marsabit, Wajir, and then Mandera being the fourth in this country. And villages, of course, given the fact that it is generally a very semi-arid or arid region, and the fact that our lifestyle is pastoral, villages are very far apart. And so boreholes could not go necessarily into every single village. Of course, we are enhancing that. We are doing a lot of boreholes, but that clearly means that it is a very, very difficult lifestyle as we speak, because water is really the source of livelihood. Water is life, as we normally say. And so if 68% of water source is boreholes, you can imagine how tough that situation is. And even with the 68% supply, the boreholes are not sufficient in terms of productivity, the amount of water output that they give. So obviously that is a major stress on the communities and on the households.
Okay, and at what point does water scarcity actually start becoming a security threat?
Well, water is a resource. It's a very important resource in our communities, in our region. And so water itself, for example, we have very limited water sources, as we have established already. But water is one of the causes of conflict in our place. We have community-established mechanisms to resolve conflicts, resulting from water, from other resources. Scarcity generally causes conflict. And water is one of the most scarce resources that we have. So Once that happens, once there is scarcity, then it puts a lot of pressure and stress on the established mechanisms to resolve conflicts.
Yeah.
And once that is challenged, then you have a very fragile situation where now it can cause conflicts between communities. For example, borehole A is on this side of the road, so it belongs to community Y. Community Y, on its side, it had a borehole, but it dried up. So we want to use this one with you. And then the other community sees it's not even near enough. Now that alone can spark a major conflict, a major clan conflict. And so really water becomes a major security issue for the community in terms of livelihoods, in terms of social cohesion, in terms of peace building. And I've always told people that let's not look at water availability as just a developmental issue.
Yeah, exactly.
We have to look at it as a peace and cohesion aspect. Because when you talk about peace building, Njoroge, you're talking about making sure that you have enough security personnel on the ground. You have police, you have military, you have this and that. And in doing so, you are pumping a lot of money to have this security presence. But on the flip, if you flip that and you say, look, what are the causes? It's because of scarcity. Can we use the same money and resources that we are putting the boots on the ground? Can use that money to do more boreholes, more water pumps, more dams, so that this will naturally resolve itself. But the idea of the traditional idea of just putting boots on the ground, the security, is really, in my view, very self-defeating program, especially if you aspire to develop and move forward as a region.
Okay, speaking about development, I'm looking at the Daua project. Yeah? There's some light at the end of the tunnel.
Yes.
Massive, massive project.
Yes.
Now, this Daua basin actually supports more than 3 million people 3 million people across Kenya, actually, not just that area. And also it covers places like Ethiopia and Somalia, as we mentioned, right? What is the current status and actual scale of the proposed Daua project?
So Daua project has started as an idea almost 30 years ago. In fact, it started during the reign of His Excellency President Daniel Arap Moi. The aspiration was that one of the key ways to resolve and provide solution to this water stress in the region is to do a dam. And because of the serious political fallouts and changes in governments, somehow that was pushed to the side.
Okay.
And so it has never been a priority. And when I'm talking about Daua project, we're talking about a mega dam that was supposed to be built on Daua River. And Daua River, for our audience, is a transboundary river. So we can call it a transboundary resource for both Kenya and Somalia, and for both Kenya and Ethiopia. And then as you exit the Kenyan border, now it becomes a transboundary river between Somalia and Ethiopia, which means it touches all the three countries. And along the way, we have, of course, farmers and people that it affects before it empties into the Indian Ocean, about 800 kilometers from where it exits Kenya. But the borderline between Kenya and Ethiopia, the river is about 160 kilometers. This river starts from the Ethiopian highlands in the middle of Ethiopia, comes towards Kenya, hits our border. Now it forms the boundary between Kenya and Ethiopia northwards. And it's about 160 kilometers, as I have said. So our plan was to do a major mega dam on where it hits the Kenyan border. And that means that it's going to be a shared, again, resource between Kenya and Ethiopia, and by extension Somalia, because the river streams down to Somalia as well. It affects those populations. So this is a river that in the way we're looking at, and this project in the way we're looking at, is going to be the biggest dam in this country, Kenya. And the average cost we're looking at it could be slightly more, slightly less, but $1 billion.
Okay.
With a capacity of something close to 1 billion cubic meters. And the idea was that because this river is seasonal And when it rains, it floods,
Yes.
destroying all the farms along the way. So we could really tap this water that is flooding so that it could be used as irrigation for domestic purposes, for livestock purposes, and also for generation of electricity.
Yeah.
And so we're looking about 80 megawatts of electricity to be generated from this river, from this dam. But we're also looking at irrigating about 400,000 acres of dry land. Okay. So we have begun the movement and reviving this project about 2014 onwards, when the previous government, then Governor Ali Ibrahim Roba was the governor, they have reached a bit of deadlock in terms of looking for funding. And so we picked it up from him in 2022, and we have put it as a priority project. So because of the fact that I told you we are looking at Mandera as a gateway, myself and my governor decided that the only inhibiting factor that is really slowing down this process of Mandera developing is lack of infrastructure. And so we decided to focus on 4 or 5 key major infrastructural projects that can turn around the region. One of which is to establish an international airport. Secondly, because the river is dividing the 2 communities, to do 2 bridges. Thirdly, these bridges should connect on this highway that comes from Isiolo to Mandera. And thirdly is because a region cannot grow economically and socially without reliable electricity. And so we came to the president and we discussed that issue with him. So that is the 4th, is to make sure that we are able to get reliable electricity that can really inspire factories, industrialization and all that thing. Right now we're using gensets to do electricity, which is not reliable. So we can't really do much, which ultimately now will bring us to the fact that people now will be able to use proper energy so that we can generate. So on those bases, those 4 things, the airport, the 2 bridges, the dam itself, that road completion, electricity. These 5 things. If we can get it in 5 years, that means Mandera will, in magnitude of hundreds, move from where it was to a new level in a short term of 5 years.
Earlier plans referred to more than 350,000 hectares of irrigation. You've just said a number of 400,000. Okay, so 350, 400, right? But from what I can see, recent government states actually refer to it at about 1.2 million acres. That's what I'm looking at here. So which figure should the public actually rely on?
So the truth is that when we talk about 400,000, we are talking about Mandera County. As I told you, this is touching 3 countries. And this is divided into 4. So clearly, you are right in the sense that it's 1.2, but if you divide that by 3 countries, you're getting about roughly that figure.
The math works.
Yes.
So what should the project first change for the people of Mandera? If we were to say, fine, the project's been launched, what's the first thing it should... In fact, before it's launched, it should already start changing the lives of people in Mandera.
Yes. So
what would be the first one?
Yes. So this is not even a brainer. It is really a straightforward, achievement, in the sense that once you get a project like that, you are looking at people are already preparing, psychologically that this thing is coming, and so it is really giving people a lot of hope that this massive project is going to take off, and there is going to be a lot of benefit for the people in terms of irrigation, livelihoods, and even generation of power, which is a major problem there. But more importantly, what people should know that is that this river on this side of Ethiopia, there are people who are really good farmers. On this side of Kenya, they are really good farmers. But because they depend on some sort of small-scale irrigation, the farthest they can go from the river, because they have to pump, is about 1 kilometer or 2. Okay? What this thing is going to do, because the dam is above the sea level by about 90 meters higher. What it does, and our projection is that it's going to pump water by gravity, not by pumping. Almost 75 kilometers out. Compare that with about 2 or 3 kilometers from the river when you're irrigating. it pumps 75 kilometers out. So you can imagine along the whole of that arc, that circle, you have dryland irrigation. If you want to go further, we can do a step down, small dam that will push it further through pumping.
Yeah.
But that is really, really a game changer, and it is very possible. The president mentioned that in 2 State of the Nations, that this must happen, His Excellency the President. And we are actually inspired, and the president keeps repeating, I am sure you have listened to him many times, along with us as the leaders. He was inspired by the Ethiopian program, the GAD, what they call the GAD program, which was in dispute for many, many years, just much less than ours.
Yep.
When ours was founded, it was much earlier, but this one was almost 10 to 15 years, I think. Finally, they have achieved. And what that has done is that it has actually doubled the Ethiopian electricity output. Ethiopia was about 6,000 megawatts. This has added 6,500. Almost instantly, Ethiopia has become a single source of power exporter in this region, including the intention of us in Mandera wanting to import electricity from. So we're looking at these things to have that kind of massive impact. Our country right now is importing 400 megawatts
from Ethiopia.
And through the Suswa line.
And I think some coming in from Uganda as well.
Some coming in from Uganda, but Uganda was our older line. Now Ethiopia is the new kid on the block when it comes to supply of energy and electricity. And as we speak, we are adding another 100 megawatts to our Ethiopian electricity import. And so what we're looking at is that this region in northern Kenya, this gateway, the Mandera Triangle, as I call it, is really going to be of such a big, immense contributor to our country and our citizens in many ways, in the sense that, number one, it is going to change our economy in terms of trade and mobility and all that. The other bit is that because over many years, over the last 50, 100 years, our economy as a country was concentrated along the railway line. Yeah. Or we have been made so to believe through the sessional paper 10 of 1965, we are overpopulated here. So the spillover of Kenya's population, once some of this infrastructural development will naturally spend onwards towards northern Kenya. And so in many ways, we are looking at a big opportunity coming up in northern Kenya, especially if our country prioritizes infrastructural development. Yes.
Okay. Speaking of infrastructure, I'm looking at who actually benefits with regards to this project. We know that large infrastructure projects can create prosperity, as you've just mentioned, and we've just mentioned from Ethiopia as well.
Yes.
But they can also create new winners and losers. Right? You can't play a game without having a winner and a loser.
Yes.
Right? So how will communities who are closest to the river share in the benefits of what is projected from this project?
In terms of the Dawa Dam, isn't it? Look, the communities that are closest to the river, as we speak, have the most challenge.
Okay.
If people know very well, rivers that flood, and there is no weather predictions that supports their farming activities. So we have large group of farmers. You can talk about on both sides. On Ethiopian side, about 3 kilometers out, 3 kilometers along 160 kilometers length of farming. So that's massive farming. And so they are small commercial growers of some certain products, and they are, of course, subsistence farmers. And their biggest challenge right now is flooding. So they plant when they're about to harvest or before it even matures, whatever they're growing, flood comes, sweeps that away. Okay? So in that sense, one of the biggest beneficiaries, and they're close to the river, one of the biggest beneficiaries is that these floods are going to be controlled. They're able to project their produce and their output at the end of the season. At the same time, they can predict and scale up whatever they normally produce. But I don't think there is any specific loss to them.
Okay.
In fact, it's going to be a win-win. One of the biggest things that I can think of a win-win situation is the fear is that, especially that's why we had a dispute in the GAD with Egypt and Ethiopia is that the water stream will reduce. Okay? If the water stream, Mandera, the river is a seasonal river, 9 months flow, 3 months dry. In any case, you are losing a lot of the water on flooding.
Exactly.
So what we are looking at is that the dam is mechanized in such a way that all the flooding water is taken in by the dam. And then when the river level goes down and it's about to go dry, it starts releasing, which means you will have year-round flow of the river, which also means you will have year-round production of crops and irrigation.
But that irrigation, I want to ask about that irrigation. Can it actually expand without weakening pastoralism and seasonal livestock movement?
I don't think it does.
No?
I don't think it does because it enhances. It enhances. And for us, livestock movement really does not impact. In fact, it helps because we have very huge rangelands. Of course, the loss will be, we will lose quite a bit of grazing rangelands to the irrigation. But our area generally is so expansive that even that loss in terms of whatever they have given out to irrigation is not going to be as impactful. If anything, we are looking at enhancing our fodder production, for example, that can cover for the grazing land. Our challenge is that because we are pastoralists and we do free graze, and then there's drought from time to time, then animals have to move for very far distances. In this case, we are trying to introduce fodder production at every level within the county. That will really, and for me, because we lose a lot of livestock to the drought, we look in this government fodder production and fodder as an input to farming, meaning that, for example, if we do coffee and tea and all that, we use a lot of fertilizer. This country spends billions on fertilizers. We can spend the same amount in fodder production to save livestock. And what people should know that is that the livestock, the meat that we use in Kenya, without export, 75% of that meat comes from northern Kenya. And if you can really provide fodder so really you're going to lose 75% of your meat supplies if we don't do anything about this drought and fodder inputs. And so we really need to invest on fodder production.
Let's assume this project comes through a PPP.
Yes.
Right? Public-private partnership. What is the public interest safeguard that must be kept, that is non-negotiable?
First of all, that is a very important point. And that's one of the things that we were exploring in terms of 400,000, acreage of irrigation and farming. That cannot be done by the local people. Unless our vision is to do subsistence farming and provide people small portions of land. But if we want to have such a massive, magnitude of at commercial level of irrigation and production, as we do aspired in Kulana, Gulalu in Tana River, then we have no option but to have a PPP program. Okay. And one of the safeguards for our community is, first of all, once this thing is done here, number one, employment belongs to the local people because there is a massive unemployment in the county and generally in the country. So massive employment, okay? We're looking at structuring in a way that there is significant benefit to all our communities that are affected in and around that area, of course, in that contractual program. So these are some of the key things under discussion right now. The president kept talking about having external partner or external company that can, an international recognized brand that can really do some of this, undertake these projects without government itself putting massive resources in it. Of course, it's going to be a partnership. There will be government resource, there will be government investment, and then investment from an external source. But nonetheless, that does not take away some of the very critical interests within the county and for the people.
You mentioned Egypt and Ethiopia in terms of the dispute they had. So if I was to say, let's do diplomacy before we get to a point of dispute. We've got 3 countries in the DOA project, right? Kenya, Ethiopia, and Somalia. So between the 3 of them, right, What should we all agree on first before we even start construction?
That's a very good question, Njoroge. Look, I just came from Ethiopia about 6 weeks ago, and we were following this project because Ethiopia is also a partner in this resource and in this dam, because it's going to be on the border between us and Ethiopia, being the fact that, number one, the river is on the border. Number two, being the fact that it has massive interest in production of hydropower.
Of course.
First of all, it has as much interest in this program as we do. On the equal measure, downstream, Somalia, this river exits Kenya, and then it hits Somalia border, where it continues to divide the border between Ethiopia and Somalia, where it also joins another river, Juba River, Ganale, and all that, and it empties into Indian Ocean, which means the whole length from where it hits our border to where it empties in the ocean, it affects people, and if it affects different countries and different nations, and so obviously there is a massive country-to-country interest. Each country has its interest. So the issue of doing some kind of diplomacy and engagement between countries is very important. And as a result, because now the first people that we had to engage had to be Ethiopia, because Kenya is leading this project. So to speak. Of course, it's going to be shared at the end, but somebody has to lead. And Kenya has decided to lead on the instructions of the president, His Excellency William Ruto, and his government. And so on that basis, we left here with a number of departments in our government. In Kenyan government, we had the Kenya Revenue, we had Kenya National Highways Authority, which is also building the bridges I was telling you. We had the Department of Irrigation, Water and Sanitation, the Cabinet Secretary and the PS. We had a delegation of almost 40 people from Kenya just 6 weeks ago, and we went to Addis Ababa, and this is our third visit. And one of our key discussions was to bring Ethiopia on board first and agree. Agree with Ethiopia, knowing that we had a major dispute on the other side, so that we don't run into those challenges again. And lo and behold, Ethiopia had that feeling already, that why are we opening another front of dispute? When we are just getting out of. And by the way, it was very interesting. I didn't know that. Ethiopia told us that we have boundary issues with Sudan. We have boundary issues with Eritrea. We have boundary issues with this river dispute thing with the Egypt. So all the countries around us, we have one or two issues related to either boundary or shared resource. The only country that we have no issue right now is Kenya. And they told us, you're opening a new one, So we told them, no, that's not our intention.
Right.
Our intention was to clearly engage and understand and agree on this project as partners, so that we are able to deliver to our people and benefit from this massive project in partnership with World Bank and, of course, IGAD, the intergovernmental organization. So the dispute is there. I agree with you. And the dispute is absolutely right, because it involves borders. So we had to involve a number of institutions, the Kenya Boundaries Commission, the Ethiopian side, the customs, immigration. So people just think it's an irrigation issue.
No.
So it involves only the Department of Water and Irrigation. No.
Environment to a point.
It touches even on foreign affairs, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It touches on Ministry of Security, Internal Security.
You've got legality as well.
Everything. So we were a massive team. And almost every department only had 2 representatives at the most. So you can imagine there are almost 20 institutions or departments or ministries involved in these things. And so we had a very good engagement. We had an MOU agreed and written. And so our next goal is now to bring Somalia on board, because the bigger challenge was how to come together with Ethiopia first, because that's now the center of action. Where it all begins is between Kenya and Ethiopia.
Primarily because of the geography.
Yes,
not because of culture.
Absolutely, it's the geography. It is where
I thought you were saying that it's easier to deal with the Ethiopians before you deal with
the geography and the relationship itself, and where the whole thing begins.
Okay, will you then take the same blueprint and say to Somalia, this is what we worked on? Or will the Ethiopians also then have to bring their 40 people together with the Kenyans' 40 people to go and now convince Somalia?
That's the direction we are taking.
Okay.
That now you see. The first time Kenya, we wanted to bring Ethiopia, Somalia, and Kenya together. But we discovered that it's much easier first to engage one partner. We finish, we are on the same page.
And say, look, we brought these guys on board.
We need to bring these guys on board together.
Okay.
And also Somalia has its fears, of course, with Ethiopia in terms of the boundaries and all that thing. And in fact, the reason why it took almost 15 to 30 years in between at different stages is partly because of resistance on the side of the Somalia, not really Ethiopia. Okay. So Somalia also needs a very in-depth engagement in terms of, but I don't foresee a very serious challenge. We have already started doing the resource mobilization. World Bank has basically accepted. The irrigation team just went to Washington D.C. to really present this program. The government of Kenya has adopted in terms of fast tracking into the budgets and the planning of our infrastructure. So we're heading in the right direction.
I want to talk about partnership because you mentioned it just now, and you had actually mentioned it before. But a project of this scale, it's not a small project. It will need, as you had said, expertise and investments that are outside of the three countries actually. But its priorities must still remain locally owned.
Absolutely,
as far as we're concerned, right? So where could the likes of American institutions add the most lasting value to Mandera's water and climate agenda, basically? Yeah.
So you see, this is a project that is open for investment.
Okay.
We talked about PPP, private and government partnerships, and we are open to that discussion. However, that is at a different stage. At the stage, of course, partners can come in and contribute towards the construction. We're talking about $1 billion. In Kenyan terms, it's $130 billion. In a more clear context, it is a 10-year budget for Mandera County, because our budget is about 13 billion per month. So we are really open to any investor that can bring value on the table as long as we put together some sort of a TOR, terms of reference in terms of our agreements, that what are you responsible for, what are we responsible for, what is the benefit to this, what's the benefit to that. So this is such a massive project that it's not going to be limited to one or two partners. It could be a consortium of partners, including private investors, including other government entities, including the international funding organizations like World Bank and African Development Bank. So it's quite going to be such a massive, and we have gone through similar projects in this country in many ways. We had the SGR, we had the Expressway, we had this LAPSET project coming from Lamu all the way to coming to Moyale. So it's not any different than any of our massive projects. Right now we pay toll station, on the Expressway. We pay at the Expressway, and we have been told we are paying the investors somehow. Large part of these tolls that we are paying is we're paying monies that we borrowed or whoever invested in this project. So it's very similar that there should be some sort of fee or something put together once we do this commercial undertaking.
I want to take you back to Minnesota.
Yes.
So assume you're back in the United States. You've done you said you've got a doctorate and everything,
yes,
right?
Yes.
I want you to pitch to me. I want the elevator pitch of what you would say to something like an American institution or developer institution or any investor who's considering partnership in Minnesota. Yeah. So what the elevator pitch would be.
Yes. Look, Njoroge, anybody who has been to Mandera will understand the massive opportunity that is there in Mandera. And when I talk Mandera, I want people to think geographically, regionally. So Mandera happens to be at the center of 3 countries, but more importantly, at the center of even more expansive region, including the Middle East. Mandera is 1,000 kilometers from Addis Ababa, 500 kilometers from Mogadishu, 1,000 kilometers from Berbera port, which is across from Yemen. It is also 1,000 kilometers from Djibouti. So if we had, and of course there is the Horn of Africa Initiative Program, which is putting together major roads, tarmac roads. If these roads are opened, and on the Kenyan side we are already opening, we had a discussion with Ethiopia. If these roads are open, you can see the kind of economic opportunity that is there, that will link the Middle East. Okay, it will link Yemen, it will link Djibouti port, and along that route, the road that we're doing has a fiber optic line running. The biggest fiber optic hub in the African coasts is actually in Djibouti. I don't know whether you have known that. It is 10 times more than the one that's closest to it. In Mombasa, there's a lot of congestion because we are supplying Central Africa. But in terms of connectivity, this is the gateway. In terms of roads and infrastructure, this is the gateway. In terms of airports and international airports, this is where we are looking at. So I don't know if you follow me on Twitter, but I have said in my tweet one time that the Dubai of Africa is going to be Mandera. Yes.
That's a good elevator pitch.
Yes.
That's very good. So what needs to happen within the next 12 months in order for this project to move from proposal to now getting, well, we talked about boots on the ground from a military perspective, but to saying the cranes moving in, we can see people now mobilizing. Obviously, we have to get the monies first.
Yes.
But, okay, in the space of that 12 months, what would then be able to fast-track it?
So right now, what we're doing is we are getting resource mobilization done to begin with. For first step, presidential clearance, presidential directive, we have achieved. The ministry has adopted it. It has been adopted into our budget and planning programs in this country for the next financial year. Already, feasibility studies, pre-feasibility and feasibility is kicking off
done
in the next few months. No, it's kicking off with some contribution from the county.
Okay.
And some contribution from the national government.
Okay.
Of course, and then the World Bank is now willing to take over from there in terms of resource mobilization. So within the next 12 months, we want to make sure that these preliminaries are sorted out. Of course, if you remember the Ethiopian one, from start to end, it took between 12 years, 10 to 12 years.
Yeah.
Okay. Of course, that is much, much bigger than ours. But considering all the bureaucracies and the challenges and the fact that there is a lot of diplomatic will in dealing, you would also expect it to drag a little bit. But first, we need to get these preliminaries and government MOUs and all these things. The other thing is, before the end of this year, we want to make sure that we have onboarded Somalia.
Okay.
Which
that would be a priority, obviously.
Yes, which we're already talking. But in terms of feasibility and the other preliminaries, we are already somewhere.
Okay. But GED was built on Ethiopian money. They didn't borrow.
True.
Yeah.
That is very true. But, Kenya being Kenya, we know that we are very far from there. You see, the level of patriotism in Ethiopia, we don't have it here in Kenya.
Okay.
I can tell you that for free. When we went to Ethiopia, I don't know if you have been to Addis Ababa in the last 2 or 3 years.
Not in the last 2 or 3 years.
So if you go to, and of course, if you have been to Europe or all these other places, if you land in Ethiopia, they have started something called the Corridor Project. And the Corridor Project is that all major roads have to be modernized.
Okay.
And the last time I've been in Ethiopia was about 5-6 years ago. When I went this time, it was completely different city, Addis Ababa. Okay. Then I went to another city called Jigjiga. Same exact thing. Massive changes. And so when a country is intent on development, I would always say, our president said that we go Singapore way. Before even we reach Singapore, wacha tuende hapo Addis Ababa. Yeah. We go to Addis Ababa and see what's happening in Addis Ababa. It is just massively changing, especially the clear areas, the visible areas on where the hotels are and the highways and bridges and all these things. You would see a highway that is about 4 or 5 lane on one side, 4 or 5 lane on another side. It has walkways. Ethiopians are very disciplined people, and they follow policies to the latter.
Okay.
As Kenyans, because of democracy and a lot of liberty and all that thing, we are very reckless. So we need a bit of order in this country and patriotism.
Dr. Ali, I want to have your final reflection. Now, Mandera has long been described through drought. That's what we tend to see in the media. So there's drought, insecurity, and marginalization. We didn't really touch much on marginalization. So 20 years from now, what should Mandera be known for?
Good question. First thing first, I would start with first, we need to have different leadership. Okay?
Okay.
What I mean by that is that leadership, as we speak, in the sense of not only Mandera, but in Kenya, is seen as a political exercise. Okay? That should not be the case. What we need is, yes, you use political platform to go into leadership, and it should end there. What we need is leaders who can provide practical solutions to the lives of the people, to the region, okay, to the whole country. And so Mandera is just part of that transformative leadership that practices, that can clearly understand in their mind that politics is politics and leadership is leadership. They are interrelated, but each one has its exclusive way of delivering to the people. So in Mandera, I am looking not only the next 20 years, but only in the next 5 years.
Okay.
That, as I have said, that I want Mandera to be the Dubai of Africa. And why do I say that? Is because if you have ever read this book by Lee Kuan Yew, former Prime Minister of Singapore, it's called From Third World to First World.
Yep.
And then, of course, that time there was no internet, there was not a lot of technology to really enhance and move things at a faster pace. But now with all the technology we have, what Singapore could do in 25, 30 years, we can do it in less than 5 years, and mostly at the level of infrastructure. And I strongly believe that with committed leadership, that is really looking at practical solutions in infrastructure, in healthcare, in economy, in education, I have a very strong conviction that we can really deliver to what I am saying in terms of Dubai is going to be, as Mandera is going to be the Dubai of Africa. And I have said that before the Singapore project by His Excellency the President. I said that 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Singapore project is a year ago. So this is not impossible. My vision is that I want to see an expressway in Mandera. Okay? I want to see an international airport that brings together all these regional hubs from Middle East to the West Africa on North Africa, and on the Far East Africa, an airport that really, distributes its flights across that region, and it's very possible. So we need to really move from this mindset of really believing that we are marginalized to doing things as leaders on our own, instead of really, pegging our hope and anchoring our hope on outside the county. We need to do this leadership. We get a shareable resource revenue of 10 billion from the national government, okay, in terms of the shareable between counties.
Right.
Now, there are two types of leaders. A leader can decide to use that 10 billion only to manage the county. Another leader can say this 10 billion is only meant for recurrent and fuel and to move the government, and so I need to move out and bring in even 1 trillion, even 100 billion, even 300 billion, so that we are able to move in the vision and the direction that we have.
You'll have capex instead of just having to operate
I
on
was
only.
with the World Bank country director here, and I told him that, I have this vision that I want to do these things, some of this massive infrastructure. And he said, my friend, you only need to present bankable projects to us, and then things will move naturally on their own, even without you pushing further. So I'm looking at, I'm just using figuratively Dubai of Africa, but really I want to see a very massive Mandera that looks very different from where we were 5 years ago, not 20 years ago.
Inshallah.
Thank you very much.
Inshallah. Dr. Ari, thank you so much for your time.
I appreciate it.
Hopefully, if we can do this in 5 years, we'll come and
Yes,
doing it from Mandera.
Absolutely.
When you're breaking ground.
Yes.
Yeah?
Absolutely. We will have this studio in Mandera.
Okay. Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Asante.
Pleasure.
Asante.
A water war begins long before governments exchange threats. It begins when scarcity is badly managed. Communities are excluded and neighbors wait too long to agree on who benefits and who carries the cost. Mandera reminds us that water is not simply a development issue. It is tied to livelihoods, food security, public health, and regional stability. The Daua project could provide reliable water, strengthen agriculture and livestock, create jobs, and open up cross-border trade. But that promise will depend on transparent planning, community involvement, and agreement between Kenya, Ethiopia, and Somalia. Mandera is often described as a frontier, but frontiers can also lead. If the Daua is managed well, it could show how a shared river becomes a source of shared prosperity rather than shared conflict. You've been listening to Panel 54, where we rethink the world one African perspective at a time. If it made you pause, reflect, or reframe, share it, start a conversation, and tag us in. Find us on our social media handles at Panel54Pod and your favorite streaming platform. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next time, stay curious, stay grounded, and keep the lens clear. Panel 54, a global perspective through an African lens.